Welcome to the Better Learning Podcast. I'm excited about the movie that we're talking about today. Lean on Me. You've seen it on the title there, and when you clicked on this was like a staple in my household growing up. And I'm joined today by Brian O'Keefe. Brian, how you doing?
Great. Good afternoon. Great to see you, Kevin. I agree with you. It's a very interesting movie to talk about.
Yeah. So give just a little perspective of what your role is with the district and where you're at, because I think that's going to actually add some context as we talk about this movie.
Certainly. So some of our titles are kind of goofy and they're long. So Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations, what it means in essence is I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the district that has all operational responsibility attached to it. So custodial, maintenance, food service, transportation, or Meals and Wheels, as we call it in the so-called industry. And then we manage all the money on behalf of the district and accept all the money in and pay all the money out on behalf of the district. So really finance and operations.
And we were just talking, you're in Wheaton, Illinois, just outside Chicago area. I grew up not too far from there. So we were talking about that.
Yeah.
But let's get into this movie. I mean, it came out in
either 87 or 89.
Because I think it takes place in 87. So I think it may have came out in 89. Yeah, it came out in 89. Which surprised me that Morgan Freeman, this was before Shawshank. So this was really like his first like big leading role. I mean, obviously he'd been in a lot of stuff.
For sure, and agreed. And as we dig into it, it's probably one of the reasons he was able to be given opportunities in the future because of his performance.
Yeah. And he had a massive demanding performance in here. Like he was the big personality in there for sure. I always like looking at IMDb to try to find out like what people thought of this one, because I feel like IMDb is like the best. Like it's a 7.4, which is pretty good. We always say if it's over a 7, it's usually worth watching. I would agree. I mean, I think that was pretty good. It's a good movie. It's not like the best movie, but it's a good movie.
It's an interesting depiction of what people thought of or believed was happening in education back in the late 80s.
Yeah. So let's set it up. So the movie starts out with him as a classroom teacher 20 years earlier in 1967. It's in New Jersey, and he actually seems like one of those like really like engaging teachers. He's not out there lecturing. He's got kids engaged or playing games or having races to go up to the front, like who can hit the buzzer and answer it first, but clearly was like the outcast with the rest of the staff at the school, to the point where they actually like voted for him to get transferred.
Yep. Yeah.
It's really weird. I'd never heard of that before, like actually happening in reality, but
well, the whole school board thing in this movie too is a little wonky in general, and probably doesn't happen that way or didn't happen that way back then. But yeah, he looked like a non-traditional teacher, certainly talked like a non-traditional classroom teacher from what I recall, lecturing from the front and, waiting for everybody to listen to every bated breath and word that came out of his mouth. And he was interactive, walking around the classroom and the scene off the bat, and probably had a little radical in him and probably had a little hippie in him at the same time too. So yeah, interesting character.
This is a chance for us to make some changes. Go in and see if we can turn this thing around. I mean, nobody else wants the job.
Eastside High was out of control, and then Joe Clark took over.
Take out your pencils and write. I want the name. Every hoodlum, drug dealer, and miscreant on my desk by noon today.
They called him crazy.
You used to call me Crazy Joe? Well, now they can call me Batman.
Crazy for padlocking the doors.
You know me 30 years. You know what I would do.
Crazy for changing the rules.
I want all of you to look at this slovenly, sloppy boy here as an example of how not to dress.
But Joe Clark was only crazy about one thing: the kids he cared about.
You mess up just once, and you're out of here.
I'll help you carry on.
You are here for one reason only: to learn.
Morgan Freeman stars in the true story of Joe Clark.
My motto is simple: if you do not succeed in life, I don't want you to blame the white man. I want you to blame yourself.
From the director of Rocky and the Karate Kid,
Welcome to the new Eastside High.
Lean on Me.
And I didn't ask you at the beginning because I always like finding out is what prompted you to pick this movie? What resonated about this movie for you?
So I came into education second half of my adult life. My mom was pretty similar, but school social worker for a long time. And when we were growing up, there are some things that some interesting, non-typical movies that you would think that for somebody growing up in a typically Caucasian, lower middle class suburbs, she wanted us to at least have some understanding of what diversity looked like and what different areas of education might look like, because that was important to her. And this happened to be one of the movies that we watched with her, and it's always struck a chord. We know Morgan Freeman has gone on to become as famous as anybody on the planet at a certain moment in time, and his character is the thing that brought me back to it, because it is so over the top but inspirational at the same time, with probably some areas that you wouldn't dare cross today, that are interesting to go back and see again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he from the first moment that that they decide to bring him in to clean up this school that had I think it was a 38% passing rate of the
I think it was
minimum
30,
standard.
35 or 30. Yeah, somewhere
It was
low
yeah.
mid 30s. Yes.
Yeah, and at the time, and again, this is based on a true story, so it's hard to tell like what was really true and what they just kind of dramatized for. But they're saying the school need to get to 75%, or the state was going to take over it, so they would lose all local control over there. So when he comes in, I mean, his first meeting, we can just talk about the first meeting he comes in, and he clearly is like does not care about anything the way it was done before. It is his way or the highway from 30 seconds after he walks in that door.
To me, one of the interesting parts too is the facial movements that he was making. Like he had not been in that building in 20 years. He's walking through the building, looking at what that building looks like, looking at all the graffiti on the walls, on the lockers, and just this perplexed overall, like, how could this have happened? And then he goes directly into his first meeting with staff. A senior Caucasian teacher is trying to, welcome to, we put together a committee, and he immediately just, in essence, took control, gave himself his own acronym to be referred to, and then within about 30 seconds walked out, and everybody in the room, I would imagine, is thinking, holy crap.
Yeah, what just happened?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. Anything else like overriding about the movie before we get into award categories that stuck with you?
Really two big things to me. One, and I think you can speak to it today, but maybe not to the same heightened emotional sense. It still captures the importance of somebody who believes in kids. Like, if you're a leader of a building, you have to believe in kids. He used the adults as the scapegoats to get the kids to believe in him, and for the building to believe in itself. And that kind of rectified itself as you got towards the back half of it. So to me, the big thing is, if you're a leader of children, you have to believe in the children and give them the opportunity to do so. That's one. Two, in the slightest fashion, you still have to be flexible as a leader, even though you believe what you're doing is the best thing for that building, for those kids, for whatever the situation may be. And there was he was still himself at the end, but there's a little bit of softness. You can tell that it creeped in.
Yeah, just a little bit,
Just
enough that that it warmed up other people around him. So your experience going through education, have you ever run across like somebody like this, like even close to where it was just like the demanding figure in the room?
Basketball coach in college.
Okay.
But not from the same persona. Like,
Okay.
I in education, I have never come across a human being that was a leader of people, that dressed that way, acted that way, talked that way, and really dismissed anything that was being given to him or her. Never seen it to that dramatic
Yeah.
extent, but certainly my first part of undergrad at a school in Iowa. Lots of respect for my college basketball coach at that point because he was that distinguished leader with tons of experience, and I was nothing but a white kid from the suburbs of Chicago. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wonder from the leadership perspective of a lot of times when you really look into the sports aspect of it too, some of the most successful coaches, there is a component there that is that way of like they
Yep.
are just so demanding, and that's kind of what drives the success is that it doesn't allow any wiggle room outside of like this is what success looks like.
Well,
So yeah, I mean,
Kevin. Even so, if you recall, in that first meeting, the football coach, the head football coach, he fired the assistant coach. He made the head football coach, and then told the now demoted head football coach that if he doesn't like it, he can quit.
yeah, yeah,
And he didn't like it because they didn't have a winning record. So, like,
right.
it's
Yeah, like we are going to, and it is. I mean, there's definitely like that persona, and I think of kind of like some of like the hard nosed like coaches that have
Mhm.
had success that way. I mean, you can go ones like Nick Saban.
Mhm.
He definitely is softened with age in there too. But even like Bobby Knight. I mean, in basketball, like that was the style for. It was almost like the prototype of like what a successful coach looked like for a while. Was we are
Yeah,
going to just be really hard on you. We're going to drive you. We're going to really focus on getting better, get as close to perfection as we can.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we saw it in New England in football for 2 decades. Like
Yeah.
you see it now at Duke in basketball, but just different human beings and how they approached it, even with some similar family backgrounds, were different. And yeah, I do think, especially in today's society, those types of behaviors or grand personas are different. They still are out there, no doubt, but you just can't be a blowhard and win all the time because your message at some point gets stale.
Yeah.
And it's different when you're a professional because you're tied to a contract than if you're on an AAU team or if you're in a club sport or at middle school, high school, even college. College is a little bit different now because of NIL and all that type of stuff. And you're a free agent, so you can go wherever you want, whatever you want, pretty much a couple times a year if you so choose,
Yeah.
as we're
Yeah.
finding out. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that dynamic is,
yeah,
yeah, huge
that's a whole podcast
yeah,
by itself.
yeah, exactly. Because before NIL, it's like you couldn't, I mean, you pretty much you had to stay. You would be penalized if you wanted to leave. You'd have to sit out a year. Yeah. Risk losing your scholarship. Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to scroll through it because this was a movie that I probably had the most notes for, and I don't know why. I've seen this movie like 100 times. This was one that three brothers, like we had watched this movie a lot. We knew a lot of the lines. We
Yeah.
quote the, pull your pants up, Sam's. Like there's just a lot in this movie. But I hadn't seen it in a long time. I would say at least 20 years. So it was definitely different eyes looking at it this time, totally
Yeah,
different perspective.
probably for me too. And you and I just, we get older as the day progresses, and just a little bit of a different perspective when you look back on something like this that you might have thought was ridiculous and not even remotely close to being true when you watched it the first few times.
All right. So first category here, we call it the John Keating Award. Who was like the ultimate teacher? Who was the best teacher in here?
Oh, I'm trying to remember her name. So there was the music teacher that
Yes.
was more focused on her concert and teaching Mozart. And then she had the backup
Yeah.
piano player who ended up singing Lean on Me at the end and really kind of gravitating around the kids. To me, she was, and unfortunately, I can't remember her name, but
Mrs. Powers. Yeah.
Mrs. Power. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought of that with her too, of like, like she listened to the kids to understand like, hey, they thought it was boring and stale, and he listened to them and adjusted to rewrite it.
When Joe Clark came in and was almost seemed like he was going to berate her about changing the class song or the school song, and he still got that stern look and he's talking in that voice, and all of a sudden he's like, congratulations, we have a new school song and you're in charge, in essence. And just like the glow of light on her face around that, and that was a nice segue into her kind of like moment really at the end of the movie where she's singing Lean on Me and all the kids are doing so also. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was. I feel like that was like the turning point in the movie too. It was when it was like it was all my way, and that was the turning point of like, okay, now other people are taking ownership of this
There was
transformation
just
too.
like there was a little bit of give at that point where
Yeah,
it had been, his acronym that he used, and there was no give whatsoever before
yeah,
that.
yeah. The other teachers that I thought were Mr. Darnell, who was the head football coach that got demoted, like the few scenes where they actually kind of showed him interacting, it was like you could tell how much he cared. They did have like one small clip where like he was shown teaching, and it looked
Yes.
like there was like some buy-in from the students. And then I thought Miss Levias, the assistant principal, just the heart, like she cared so much. She was like so willing to do it. And the fact that she was putting up with him because she cared so much about the kids and the staff.
And also the one that had that roughly 45-second rant that put him back in his place near the end of the movie to say, this is not your way is your way, but your way is vilifying the staff that actually cares about kids.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. She put him in line. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, kind of.
Yeah, she tried a little bit. All right. So the next one is cliques, where they're stereotypes that were shown. There were a lot of stereotypes in this movie. Yeah, I mean, I can jump in on some of them. I've just obviously they from the beginning it's like they have like the hoodlums, the drug dealers, all the ones that that were causing the trouble, and then beyond that, I mean, they didn't really dive into too many other ones in there. Like they really didn't have kind of like the jocks or the cool kids. They obviously had a few kids that they followed a little bit more. I don't know. Other ones stand out for you, Brian?
I mean, certainly the big stereotypes right off the bat is gangbangers, drug dealers, hoodlums. That was the group he asked for that list of, and they're all up on stage acting probably in the way that he would have expected for a group like that to act. And then he pitches them all out like, okay, you're all gone. Thanks for coming. Don't come back here again. When I think it was not too long after that, when Sam's is trying to get back into school, he'd been kicked out. He's trying to get back in school, and Principal Clark takes him up on the roof. And the stereotype about drugs and what it does to your brain and how you are stupid if you do that, like was also, it was an interconnected message, not about the individuals, but about, how bad all that stuff is together, which was, I'd forgotten about that. It was interesting to me because he was ready to, I mean, he in essence told Sam's like, if you're going to do this, just jump off the roof and let's get it all. Let's get it over with now.
Yeah. If you want to kill yourself, do it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's stop wasting time and let's just do it and move on. And that was probably a pretty good, I mean, Sam's is a goofball in the movie, but a turning point for him because he didn't allow it to happen.
Well, I mean, that's a good one going into our next category, class clown. Like, was there a character that stole the show, didn't have a major role, but got a lot of attention?
Yeah, pretty much him. Pretty much him.
Yeah, I felt like Sam's was like the one that, he just picked on the most. It was always the one that, that was going to represent kind of the one that was at the border of like troublemaker, but still like had a good heart and like didn't want to be the troublemaker. He wanted to do it, and he just had a lot of that. There wasn't a lot of humor in this, but I would say a few moments of humor.
Yeah. I mean, there's some interesting things that we'll get into later too regarding females and pregnancy and stuff like that. But Sam's, to me, was that character that was going to probably that type of human that's just going to follow whoever's cool and whoever he can get along with. And now that I kind of take a step back and think about it, he is somebody Principal Clark could have molded because of just who he was. And realistically, if this is true, if this student and character is true, it's pretty smart from his perspective to understand that and then to use the inner motivation of that child to then benefit, to kind of move things along inside the school, because if he can do it, others can come with him.
Yeah. All right. So if we move into the homecoming scene, what was the like iconic like scene of this movie? There were a couple that I thought could be in here. I want to hear what if there are ones that you considered.
I mean, there's a few moments as an educator, you kind of, you look at something, you're like, well, that's just not how it works. So how it, like, a board meeting isn't run that way. Like, it's, some of that stuff was interesting to me, even though I don't think we got to see the paper with the score on it the time
Right.
when they passed, but we did the time when they didn't. They weren't passing. I think the fact that the school rallied around a character like Mr. Clark and Free Mr. Clark and singing Lean on Me and all that type of stuff. There's a little bit of cheeseball to that
Yeah.
when you think about it, but there was if you take it on face value, there was a message that student body was trying to send to the adults, and it was not spoken aloud through articulating why. There was the emotional aspect to, we want our guy back.
Yeah. I love the way you explain that, because I agree that was in one of like the Free Mr. Clark when they're doing that. Which now looking back, it was like it's kind of weird that it was like the mayor, like it was kind of like city council, the mayor's office where they
Yeah.
do school board meetings, and the jail all in one building.
Right. Yeah. I mean, convenient for, I guess, for
Yeah,
many
very
places,
convenient. Yeah. They definitely made it feel like this was a bigger city in there, but just how they all had that. But I agree. The other ones I considered that of like could have been like right before when they took the test, when they did sing Lean on Me. I love the scene, which was kind of that turning point of when they're in the bathroom and the first time that they sing the new school song. That one always stood out for me
True.
for sure.
I would agree. But you weren't sure where it was going, because he pulled them all out of the bathroom and then went to the classroom. And that's where that uplifting moment, like, okay, you got a new school song. Everybody needs to know it in English and in Spanish.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
But that
like
was kind of like the first time too. That was when they say that in English and Spanish, that it really wasn't, didn't seem like a focus until that moment.
I agree with you too. Like, if I think about some of the big moments, and specifically Professor or Principal Clark in this, when he was on stage before they were taking standardized testing, he was a preacher. Mm-hmm. At that point, he was in full preacher mode, and I think that's one of the brilliant aspects of this role, and Morgan Freeman being able to nail it. He was at the pulpit, standing in front of his flock and preaching and providing uplifted emotions and informations and rallying the kids. And then when you flip to the end, that whole turnaround where they're doing the same thing for him is an interesting dynamic when you think about the back half of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so if we skip ahead to the one-liner, I have a few in here. Did you have any one-liners? Yeah, that you think are finalists for this category?
I mean, certainly when he refers to himself in the acronym right off the bat, that was and even better than that. So not just the acronym, when the Caucasian experienced teacher turns to, I think it was Miss Levi. It was either Miss Levias or another female teacher that was sitting there taking notes, and he asked what the acronym was, and then she said what the acronym was, and just his face just like dropped.
Yeah.
It was
Can't
hilarious.
believe
Certainly, Sam, pull up your pants, and there's some interesting things, but the fact that really his tenure within that principalship begins with him referring to himself as an acronym in the third person was amusing to me as all can be.
Yeah, there were a few of those. I mean, I still love the pull your pants up Sam's on there. There was one moment where Kenesha's mom, the one who basically kicked her out, and she's, and I don't want her to see me like this anymore. That line, I feel like in our family, we just use that one all the time.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
And I don't know why. I don't know if it was like just the way she said it. And then when he gets yelled at, when Mr. Clark gets yelled at, basically put in place by they don't say he's a superintendent, but I'm assuming he's
Yeah,
a
he is the
superintendent.
superintendent. Yes,
Um,
Dr. Napier.
and
Yes,
yeah, and they basically just like yell at each other, and then they walk out. He's like, "Come on, let's get something to eat."
right.
Like
You're right. That was pretty good.
that was good. But I think my winner is during like when they're all like doing the free Mr. Clark and they're all like around there and they talk about getting a new principal that's better. And Sam's yells out, "We don't want a good principal. We want Mr. Clark." Like that was, yeah,
Right.
I think that's my winner.
Which builds into that interesting dynamic from when, I mean, nobody wanted him around right off the bat, right? And then before the standardized test, not to practice one, but the real one, and he's preaching up in the auditorium, up in the on the stage, and then so he's gone from like villain to preacher to beloved, like aura type thing at the end where they want him to come out of jail, but he still says, if I taught you anything, you have to obey the law and follow the law. Like all of that was
Yeah.
interesting stuff to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think actually that leads into some of the things I was going to talk about in the realistic or ridiculous category here. I mean, there's a lot of ridiculous. There's some real. I mean, I would say there's a lot of realistic. Anything that stood out to you that was more like realistic, what we know about with our experience working within schools?
Yeah, there's probably a couple things. One, especially in today's, the biggest thing in education to me today, from a structural perspective, is the most important thing the school board does is hire a superintendent, right? And that was an interesting dynamic of Dr. Napier almost acting like it wasn't his fault or responsibility, but somebody kind of made him do stuff that maybe he didn't necessarily feel like doing. That's real in our lives all the time. But the whole setup of the school board and that type of stuff was a little kind of funky and didn't seem right to me as a whole. The school board meeting that didn't seem all that real to me. But like, you and I doing a quick catch up before we started, what I do believe is real in education today is you have to have somebody that believes in kids.
Yeah.
And if you are a leader of young people, you have to believe that that every one of them, regardless of who they are, what they look like, and where they come from, can achieve, and you help them do that. That was him. How he went about doing it was probably is unconventional today, or certainly not the norm, but that is still real. That will be as real in education regardless of what time frame we're talking about, because if you don't do that, kids aren't going to succeed as distinctly as you would expect them to be able to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And on the realistic side, I would add that one, how much just the teachers care. Like I do think like at the heart of it, teachers care a lot about the students and want to do that. But I think on the flip side of that realistic side is like how much leadership does matter. And I've seen it over and over again. You put a really good leader in there, it changes the game. It really does change the entire culture of the school, the staff, and how they respond, and the communities too. I really, I feel like I've seen it throughout the country. Whether it's at the principal level or at the district level. Leadership has a lot to do with that culture.
Yeah,
and
leadership
maybe not
matters
as
for sure.
Yeah, not maybe not as like drastically or like as fast as it happens in this movie,
Right.
but I do think that was pretty realistic, like how just a different perspective of what that tone is that's being sent from the leadership.
Yep, it's interesting too that you mentioned that also, because if you think about when he walked into that auditorium for the first time and there's utter chaos, right? But the teachers are in there, but there's just no control whatsoever. And then you move about probably an hour and 15 minutes or so, hour and 20 minutes to the scene where he's preaching up on the stage in advance of all the kids taking the standardized tests. All those teachers were in the same spots. They're all still standing in the same areas, but there's a whole different feel to it. So is that, I doubt that the teachers all of a sudden or didn't move from I care about the kids to I don't care about the kids, or I don't care about the kids, so I care about the kids. But that speaks to like what order and persona and procedures and just day in day out consistency can do for a building and for a student body that's positive.
You know, when we work with schools at K-12, it's not just about furniture or design, it's about impact. Our radically student-centered approach puts students at the center of every decision. From that first conversation to the final walkthrough, we're focused on creating spaces that actually work for the kids, the teachers, and the community. So if you're looking to do more than just check a box on your next project, let's talk. Visit K12.com. That's KAY TWELVE.com and see how we're helping schools transform learning one student at a time. Because at K-12, it's not just about projects and furniture, it's about purpose. All right, so I want to get your take on this realistic and see if you agree with it. The focus on like how much importance the standardized test has. I know there's been moments where it's like extremely important, and then there's been kind of some pushback on the standardized test. What's your view of like where it is right now, coming from the level, like how important are those standardized tests?
So this is coming from somebody that never taught in the classroom, so I won't ever pretend to know what it's like, leading young men and women in that area. I think they're important because it helps educators understand where students may need some assistance. But I don't think it's the end all be all like it was when we were growing up and you needed the highest ACT and or SAT score possible to make sure you can get into what college or university as a whole, and the universities use that as the main driver. I can certainly say from my now finishing up, it's either year 16 or 17 in education, a portfolio, a look at the whole child, at the whole human, is a much more of a prevalent focus coming out of education at the K through 12 level, going into higher education or community colleges, because the experiences of kids and what they have the ability to be involved in is so much more in depth, and there's so much more access than what there was when we were back in school. So yes, is that a pinpoint for achievement? Yes, but by no means is it the end all be all.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I was actually thinking of the dynamic of like the importance at the like what you're talking about, the individual student level, but then how much importance at like the like the school level, like what our grade is, like we want
nowhere near
nowhere near
what
that.
it was shown
All right, well that's
in,
encouraging.
in that movie, because realistically, when we celebrate our young men and women, yeah, there are achievements in certain academic areas, in extracurricular areas, in athletic areas, but when we talk about education, at least inside of our district, I would imagine it's pretty similar throughout northern, I would hope the whole country, but probably pretty similar throughout at least northern Illinois. We're talking about the whole child, because our responsibility is to support the whole child, not just help them do great on a test.
Yeah. All right. On the flip side, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anything that stands out? I know there's some like definitely dramatized scenes in this movie. Yeah.
Truly, his ability to fire anybody at any point for any reason is completely ridiculous in today's society. And they had a union,
That's true. Yeah.
that like,
which was even weird. He fired the music teacher, but then he tried to he suspended Darnell.
Yes.
And they're like, well, you can't do that. But in the meantime, the music teacher was fired. And
just the ability for one person to be able to dictate decisions related to employment, that's not how education or the real world is, even on the corporate side with my experience. And there's a process to go through, and typically everybody's due process. And so I found some of those things absolutely hilarious as they're going on, because I'm like, that's not real, but that's funnier than heck, just to hear a human tell another human being, Mr. Darnell, you are no longer our football coach. You are now the assistant football coach because we don't win enough. Like in his first meet, like so some of the over the top
Yeah.
stuff related to who he wanted doing what for him certainly was pretty far from realism.
Yeah. So there was one thing that stood out to me in there of like the ridiculous, and that it seemed like he knew the first name of every kid, and they said like 1,700 students in there. So I mean that's awesome if he did do that, and that's a great like practice to do. And then the other thing that he did, I want to make sure I phrase this right, but he found ways to like touch the kids,
Oh,
like
good point. Very good
like
point.
like he did a lot of like touching their shoulder or their like just things of like getting more of like that physical connection, not in a bad way,
Yep.
but which I think is probably not as acceptable now to
No,
even
that's
do that. Like I would think most of the training is like never ever touch
we
a
are hands
student.
off. We are hands
Yeah.
off completely. So yeah, that's I forgot about that. It's a really good point. I think I would imagine that the producers and those that wrote it were trying to attach the humanistic relationship
Right. Yeah.
to
Because
it.
there is power in that.
Even
Yeah.
how we just addressed some of the I wouldn't be I would be fired if I called a young woman sweetie
Yeah.
as I'm walking through a
Yeah.
hallway in
Yeah.
a school like that. That stuff not realistic, but this is
Yeah.
also back in the late '80s where
Right.
things that aren't as hyper attuned as they are today.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. If I move on, because we spent a lot of time in that category, the iPhone effect. This is like, this is, late 80s. You don't have a lot of the technology things that we have now. If it was remade today, phones are in there. I
Oh,
mean, he's fired so fast,
he doesn't make it out
right?
of
Or
day
it's just
one.
about, yeah, he doesn't make it out of day one. You think of the chains on the door, like just like what the kids are capturing, every day and on theirs. It's just, yeah, you think it's just a totally different world now.
For sure. This fits back into the ridiculous category. Like no principal could tell a fire chief what to do, and
Right.
and and post security at the entrance to the school to make sure that the fire department couldn't come in. That fits into that category. Chains on doors while it was hyped up in the movie. Never ever is
Right.
something that could happen, especially in today's environment. And the thing that I find ridiculous, humorous, but it was part of the story was the stupid bullhorn that he walked around with the whole time too.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And I like when the kid makes fun of him, it's
Yes.
is doing that. Yeah, I guess some of the ridiculous in there too is around that. This is more the storyline of it though. So he gets arrested, goes to jail because he has chains on the door. And then they get him to come out and talk, and because they passed the test, now he's not arrested anymore, and he's not at threat of losing his job. I'm just like, there's just like a big
Yeah.
big disconnect in the storyline there.
Yeah. I mean, the end's a little cheeseball. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be honest. And, it's fitting a narrative of the story. But yes, I mean, I have no doubt that when you're in public government, that there's some interesting conversations behind closed doors when you're the mayor of Trenton, New Jersey, or wherever. But just the mayor
Yeah,
was
that
a
you can
grease.
put people on the school board and just
Yeah,
move
I
things
mean
around like
the
that.
mayor's a grease ball,
Yeah.
in this movie, and certainly is only worried about what's important to him, and that's getting reelected.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
sways whatever way makes sense for him at that moment.
Yeah. The other aspect on the technology component is just now with the security cameras. I mean, part of this is like the chaining the doors and everything like that is solved, or you know, mostly solved by the technology now,
Yeah, true.
where, like like you get an alert every time the door is open. You got security cameras, those kids that are roaming the hallways, before they jumped in the bathroom. You go back and you can see exactly who it was now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right, Kevin. In general, even if you were looking at 10 years ago, it's hard to see how he would have made it out of day one. Just overall behavior and how he addressed the adults and how he treated whether it made sense or not. The kids that were deemed in the category of hoodlum, drug dealer, or gangbanger like that. Yeah, that's not the real world. But it's true that it was a part of the culture in that building that had to be changed. So there is some realism to it, just the so-called absurdity of how it was approached from a cinematic perspective was a little heightened.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, if we go to the next of The Substitute, if you're going to recast this movie, I mean, he played it really well. I mean, Morgan Freeman. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm seeing your face on here. Who do you think? Who do you think could have been a better person to play Mr. Clark?
Quite frankly, I don't know if there isn't anybody better in terms of how he was in that character. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. Like, to me, he's part of the reason why I love and enjoy that movie, because that character is for sure larger than life.
Yeah. Yep.
And if
Yep.
the real Joe Clark was anywhere near that, it probably was fun, interesting, and a bit sad all at the same time, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah, I mean, that I was reading up a little bit on the real Joe Clark of like, he stayed in education and ended up having more controversy later on too, but just with his discipline and his approach. But yeah, I thought maybe Denzel Washington, maybe.
Yeah, that one's fair. That's probably
I'm
the.
just trying to think the era and yeah.
But like Denzel, yes, could Denzel have inserted himself into that role? And we've seen his acting, like, be able to preach and to play that type of
Yeah.
role. But when this movie came out, like,
Yeah, he would have been pretty young.
Denzel wasn't around. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he was a young human being. So, like, if you fast forward 40 years and you make a sequel, he's probably somebody you should consider.
All right. So this category we call hags. Like, this is what if the kids are writing in the yearbooks, which is we're right at that time of the year where it's like, have a great summer. And I don't know. I hadn't seen hags until I saw my kids' yearbooks over the last couple of years. It's like all the kids are writing. But was there anything like, was there like, like a phrase or like a lasting effect of this movie for you?
Not a specific phrase. There weren't a lot of one-liners or catchy type. Some of the stuff we mentioned already. Sam's pull up your pants. That's funny. And
Yeah.
that was said several times. Like, if I'm trying to picture, if I can put myself in that situation, and I'm writing in somebody else's yearbook, what would I write? Like, if I was involved, what would I write? And the first thing that comes to mind is, "We did it."
Okay. That's cool.
Like, that's because that's really what the end of the movie was driving towards. And again, even though we didn't see the piece of paper indicating the actual percentage that passed, they just announced that it passed. And if everybody had yearbooks at that point and turned around, you could certainly say, like, congrats, or we did it, or something like that.
Yeah. All right. So mine right there, I would say, is maybe just free Mr. Clark. I can see a bunch of kids just writing that on there. Oh, like free Mr. Clark.
Yeah.
So where are they now? I mean, this is, 35 years later, Mr. Clark's either retired or like, I think he passed. I can't remember if he's still alive. He may have passed away, but definitely retired. Do you think he would still be involved? I mean, he was probably, I would guess, in the movie, probably in his 50s, so he'd be in his late 80s.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's around either. I should have looked it up, and I didn't. And I apologize for that.
Now
I wonder how long he stuck around in education. Like, to what age was he still involved with education? And my guess is, if this is some factual interpretation of his persona, he's probably thinking the same way and doing the same thing today.
I mean, any of the other ones, what do you think? What do you think some of the students, you think Sam's, what would he be doing now?
Sam's would have turned into a social worker. Huh. And I say that because he had the ability to achieve. He just needed the right push to get there, and then to have the support around it. I would not have been surprised if he would have turned out to be somebody that wanted to help the next Sam's. And social work or therapy or psychologist or something, like that. It doesn't mean that he wouldn't go off and be a knucklehead, but to me, if he was going to find a path, his path would have involved thinking about who he was and trying to find the next him to help the next him or her.
I like that. So I did look up. He did pass away. Joe Clark passed away in 2020 at the age of 82. But in 1995, he was appointed director of a juvenile detention facility and did that for 7 years. He had a lot of complaint. He had an investigation on use of excessive force and punishment. So yeah, he defended his tactics though. So yeah, interesting on there.
So
Uh,
he was who he was, and it carried with him regardless of where he went.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting though that's where he went from. He went from high school to yeah,
So somebody at
and
one point said, "Well, if he can do it here,
yeah, he'd be good
let's
here.
let's try to
Let's see if
let's
he can
try
turn these
him over
kids
here
around.
too."
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
All right, so I added a last category
All right.
recently that I don't know if showed up on what we gave you, but it's called the Battle of the Bands. What was the best music from the movie? So we got the title
Yeah, I mean
song.
that's the simple one.
There's some good music in this though. Just
Yeah,
like
I'm
even
trying to
the opening
remember.
"Welcome to the Jungle," Guns N'
Oh,
Roses at
that's
the
right. I forgot
beginning.
that was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
That I mean, heck, I was in high school in the late '80s also, so it kind of fits right in with what I was listening to at that same point
yeah.
too.
Uh,
What I found interesting about the title, the song, and the title is how Mrs. Powers sung it differently at the end of the movie than how the original score was sung
yeah. Well,
which was in the credits at the end
yeah.
of the movie. It was an interesting dynamic.
It was. I actually made a comment on that. Is like in the movie they did the song twice in a row. They had her sing it, hers, and then they had another version right after it. Like literally
Mm-hmm.
just went right into this other version, and then they had the third version of it like at the beginning of the credits. My vote is actually the school song, the alma mater.
Yeah.
Like I love that. I just love the way they sang that, and yeah, even as I'm rewatching it with my kids last night, I'm like singing it out loud. They weren't happy with it. It didn't sound very good to them, but
No, yeah, I do my best never to ever sing in public ever because I sound like a Midwesterner that has swallowed a frog trying to swing. It's awful.
so well, awesome. This is a good movie. I mean, I love this movie. This is a great one. Get some get some learnings out of it. Tell me, I mean, real world for you. What's your life look like these days?
I think every day I said head above water. That's my goal, just to keep my head above water. Wheaton Warrenville 200. We're in the heart of DuPage County, directly west of the city of Chicago, about 30 miles. The county seat is inside of our district boundaries, so we've got a lot of politics that happen in and around us. We've got a tremendously supportive set of communities, superintendent, board of education. So fortunate in November to have $150+ million referendum to update 3 of our 4 middle schools happen. So we've got we'll have $150 million of construction on 3 of our 4 middle schools over the next 3 years. We typically have $7-8 million of construction on top of that just to keep up
Wow.
in other areas. We're about the 20th largest school district in the state of Illinois. 12,000 kids, 21 schools, 23 facilities, 2,000 employees. So there's never a dull moment, regardless of the topic. But everything
And
we
is it
do, my
it's
whole
K
job,
through pre-K through 12?
yeah, we're actually early childhood through 12. So we
Early
have an
childhood
early
12. Yeah.
childhood program
Which
too that
Illinois is always
supports.
weird because sometimes you don't. Sometimes you
Right.
get a district like just for a junior high. Like, it totally varies
Yeah.
based on.
And I think it's a huge, like we're an amalgamation of districts from many, many, many decades ago. Super supportive. You know, I went to school in districts next to this district, but I got married inside of Wheaton at one of the churches. My wife lived in Wheaton for a few years before we got married. Like I spent time in Wheaton when I was growing up, so it's a part of my life, if you will, and story before I was in education
Yeah. Well,
and
I want
now
to
in
hear that
education.
too. You mentioned that because that's really kind of rare in education to be at the district level without starting kind of through the teacher path in there. Tell me what was your journey?
It's a long story, so I'm going to make it pretty simple. One of my closest friends, fraternity brother, we both graduated from Elmhurst College. He's a little bit younger. I got to have some fun with him when he was pledging. We'll save those stories for a different podcast because we don't talk about that. But his name is Dr. Chris Mond. So Chris is now the executive director and CEO of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. He was in my role in districts, superintendent for about a decade before he just took his current role about a year ago. And I was getting a little frustrated with the corporate world in the mid 2000s. And he came to me and said, if you ever want to have a conversation, everything that you do now is something that is responsible with inside of a school district. And if you can run a $50 million business here, you can do it inside of education. And the benefit is you're doing it for kids.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, we deal with challenging parents and challenging students, but my mom being a social worker and seeing her experience and thinking about how, as I grow older, do I think about the give back that isn't as selfish from the corporate perspective, and knowing that I get to walk into a school district as long as my key card works every single day and do stuff, even though it's not directly impacting kids that I can touch and feel on a daily basis. But I know everything we do is about kids, and somehow I managed to get that done and stick around, and hopefully the key card works tomorrow morning too.
Yeah. Well, cool. See, it seems rare. Like there's only a handful of people that I feel like I've met that have come from outside of education and then kind of later, mid-career or, like that have got pulled in. Do you see it a lot? Like, have you found like more of a community of like people that were similar paths to you?
We're certainly seeing it more like in the business office. So there's quite a
Okay.
few people that come from financial sector, from CPA audit backgrounds into the business office because in the end we're a major business, right? I mean, our
Right.
responsibility
Yeah.
is
Most
community and
communities,
kids.
it's like the largest organization in
I
the
mean,
community.
our district has a $250 million budget, so we're not, we could fit into a Fortune like 1,000 type conversation. Maybe not today, certainly a while
Yeah.
back, but part of it is I don't think there's as much of an interest from today's teaching pool and those experienced teachers to move into a role like this. It's not unique, but you get pulled away from kids. So
Yeah.
if you went into teaching to teach, you stay in teaching because you're with kids all the time.
Right.
You really get pulled away from kids when you're in a position like mine or anything inside of a school service center like we are, or a district office is what you typically hear. But I do find those that have come from the corporate, our mindset's a little bit different than we do. Not that those that came before us did not, because my predecessor did a superb job over a couple decades and is allowing me to do things that he didn't have the chance to do because he did such a good job of tightening the purse and managing, squeezing, a buffalo out of every nickel type of thing. But we do come with this stewardship mindset that has, like, we are responsible for taxpayers' money and we take it seriously. It's not just some flippant thing that we say to make people feel better. And when you come out of the corporate world where you're guarding every dollar because you have investors that need you to guard every dollar, you bring that mindset into the public education. The difference is you get to take care of kids. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and yep, that's great. Oh, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being on the show and talking about Lean on Me. For the listeners, if you've not already subscribed, wherever you're listening, watching this, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or betterlearningpodcast.com, which is kind of our hub for everything, just hit subscribe. And if you like it or have any suggestions, we appreciate any of the comments or filling out any forms. If you want to be on the show or you want to suggest a movie or a guest or a topic, we really take those to heart. So Brian, great talking to you about this. Yeah, I feel like next time I'm in Chicago, we'll have to connect.
Yeah, please visit, Kevin. Happy to host, and we can always dig into the movie a little bit more than we did here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. The Better Learning Podcast is produced by Matt Rogers and edited by Kelly Jones. The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily represent the perspectives of their affiliated companies, organizations, or associations.